The keys jingled in the lock, and I pushed open the heavy wooden door, which was always a little sticky in rainy weather. Outside the windows of Mount Rainier, the fall rain drizzled, turning the streets into mirror ribbons, reflecting the light of the street lamps. She took off her coat and hung it on the hook in the hallway, adjusting the collar habitually. 30 years as a school principal had taught me to watch every detail of my appearance. Voices came from the living room. Brenda had brought Cale in again. They'd been dating for 2 years, and I'd gotten used to his presence in the house, though something about his demeanor always made me wary. Maybe it was the overly confident way he walked through other people's houses, or the way he looked at things as if he was assessing their value. "Mom, you're here." Brenda peeked out of the living room holding some catalogs. We were just discussing options for the kitchen. I walked into the living room where tile samples, color schemes, and pictures of kitchen sets were spread out on the coffee table. Cale sat in my favorite chair, the one Robert had bought for me for our 10th wedding anniversary. He was flipping through the catalog with the focused look of a man making important decisions. "Hello, Sandra," he said, nodding without lifting his head from the magazine. "Look what interesting options we found. This tile will look great with the new cabinets." I sat down on the couch, watching my daughter enthusiastically show me pictures from the catalogs. Brenda had always been impulsive. Even as a child, she could change her mind 10 times in a day about what dress to wear to a school party. But now, there was a special excitement in her eyes that I recognized from years of working with teenagers. The excitement of a person who has already decided everything and is just waiting for confirmation. "Cale says beige will be more practical than white," Brenda continued, pointing to the swatch. "In fact, we're thinking of redoing the whole layout. Take out that wall between the kitchen and the dining room and make a big open space. That's the trend right now." "Yeah," Cale said, finally looking up from the catalog. "Your house has good potential, Sandra. It just needs to be modernized a little, brought up to today's standards of comfort." I was taken aback by the way he said, "your house," with a barely perceptible emphasis on the first word, as if it were a temporary formality that would soon be rectified. I've been a school principal long enough to sense the subtext in people's words. Every parent, every teacher, every education department official had ulterior motives, and I learned to recognize them. "What do you think of the living room?" Cale asked, looking around the room with an appraising eye. "That old wallpaper's long gone out of style, and the furniture, well, it's nice, but a little heavy for a modern interior." Brenda laughed, that light laugh she always used to smooth over awkward moments. "Cale's right, Mom. We could do something lighter, airier in here. Maybe put a new couch, a modern TV on the wall, and your piano. Well, to be honest, nobody plays it." I looked at the old piano in the corner of the room. Robert had bought it when Brenda was little and dreamed of being a musician. The dream lasted exactly 3 months, but the piano stayed. I played it sometimes in the evenings, simple tunes I remembered from high school. "You could sell it," Cale continued, as if he hadn't noticed my silence. "Or give it to a music school. It would free up a lot of space for something more functional." "Functional," I repeated, feeling something inside me clench. "Yeah," Brenda nodded. "Like a big bookcase or a home office for Cale. He works from home sometimes. He needs a comfortable place." Cale looked at his fiancé approvingly. Was it just me, or did he actually stroke the arm of the chair as if he already considered it his own? I followed his gaze as it slid across the room, stopping at every object, every detail of the interior. He was looking at my house with the eyes of a man who was already mentally rearranging furniture and planning changes. "And the bedrooms?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Oh, we have so many ideas." Brenda perked up. "Your bedroom will be perfect for us. It's the biggest and has the best light." And the guest room will be the nursery. We're planning on having kids a year or two after we get married. Where am I gonna sleep? The question came out of my mouth. Cale and Brenda looked at each other, and there was something in that look that made me even more wary. It was the look of two people who had already talked it over between themselves and were now just bringing the information to a third party. Mom, we told you, Brenda said with a slight annoyance in her voice. After the wedding, things are going to change. We need space for family life, and well, you'll be better off living on your own. Remember how Aunt Linda always invited you to come to Oregon? Aunt Linda, my older sister, who actually asked me more than once to move in with her after Robert died. Linda lived in a small town on the coast where she spent her days growing roses and reading novels. The quiet, measured life of an older woman who had already fulfilled all her obligations to her family. It would be perfect, Cale added, his voice as sure as if he'd already made up his mind. Linda's lonely, she'll enjoy the company, and we can start our married life in a comfortable environment without embarrassing each other. Not embarrassing each other, so I'm embarrassing them now, just by living in my own house. The house I bought 28 years ago, when Robert was just starting his career and I was already working as a vice principal of a school. The house where Brenda grew up, where we celebrated her birthdays, where we welcomed New Year's, where her friends came to visit. The house, every corner of which held our family memories. Brenda got up from the couch and walked over to me, sat down next to me, and took my hand. Her palms were warm, like when she was a little girl, when she would come to me for comfort after failing in school. Mom, you realize this is for the best, right? Cale and I are serious. We want kids. We want to build a family. And it's time for you to take a break. Stop worrying about everyone else and think about yourself. Think about yourself. That's an interesting way of putting it. So, when I live in my own house, I'm not thinking about myself. When Brenda and Cale left, carrying away their catalogs and plans to rearrange my life, I sat in the living room and looked at the walls that remembered so many years. The silence of the house enveloped me like an old blanket, and in that silence, memories surfaced. The year 1997. I was 24, had just gotten a job as an English teacher at Mount Rainier High School, and the pay seemed like a royalty after student poverty. Robert was working as a junior accountant for a small firm, earning a pittance, but dreaming of his own business. We rented a tiny apartment on the outskirts of town, where the kitchen was the size of a pantry and the bedroom window only overlooked the wall of the neighboring building. Why would we buy a house? Robert said when I first brought it up. We're young. We might change our minds, want to move to another city. A house is a decades-long commitment, but I've seen this house before. I passed by it every day on my way to and from school, and every time I slowed my step at the white gate. 2 stories, with an attic and a small porch, with a flower bed out front and an old oak tree in the yard. The owner, an elderly Mrs. Palmer, was selling it after her husband died and was moving to California to live with her children. This is our home, I told Robert when we first stepped inside. I could feel it. Robert looked at the high ceilings, the wide windowsills, the fireplace in the living room, and shook his head. Sandra, we can't afford it. The down payment is half my annual salary. Then I'll make the down payment, I replied calmly. I had savings, money I'd been saving since my freshman year of college, working as a tutor, waitressing in cafes, babysitting for neighbors. Every dollar I put aside with the thought of the future, of the day when I could buy something that was truly mine. My parents thought I was too practical for a girl my age. Other students spent money on dresses, cosmetics, entertainment, and I put the bills in a tin cookie jar and kept a notebook with calculations. But in your name? Robert asked, and there was something in his voice that I didn't recognize at the time. Pride, resentment, or just surprise. We'll put it in my name, I confirmed. I'm paying for it. Mrs. Palmer was surprisingly cooperative. Maybe she liked the fact that the young teacher was so determined to buy the house. Or maybe she was just tired of the tradesmen who came here every day and tried to drive down the price by pointing out that the roof needed to be repaired or the plumbing replaced. People who will love it should live in this house, she told me the day she signed the papers. Not people who only see it as an investment. The first few years weren't easy. Mortgage payments ate up most of my paycheck, and I had to take extra hours, teach night classes for adults, and check test papers on weekends. Robert helped with utilities and groceries, but I did the bulk of the work. But every morning, I woke up in my own bedroom, made coffee in my own kitchen, and knew that no one could tell me to move out. You work too hard, Robert would say sometimes when he caught me checking my notebooks on Sunday night. I work as much as I need to, I replied, keeping my head down from my student essays. In 1999, Brenda was born, and the house was filled with new sounds: baby laughter in the living room, the stomping of little feet on the stairs, the lullabies I sang while rocking my daughter by the bedroom window. Robert had started his own accounting firm and was doing well, but the house was still mine. My name was on the deed. I paid the mortgage, and it gave me a sense of stability that no life's vicissitudes could shake. Mom, why is our house in your name? Brenda asked me when she was 14 and helping me sort through the paperwork in my office. Because I bought it, I answered simply. Didn't Daddy help? Daddy helped with living in the house, and I bought it. At the time, I thought it was an important distinction that Brenda should understand. There's a difference between living somewhere and owning something. I wanted my daughter to grow up with the understanding that a woman can and should own property, her finances, her independence. In 2007, our school principal, Mr. Henderson, retired, and the Board of Education offered the position to me. By that time, I had already worked as a head teacher for 12 years. I knew the school like the back of my hand, was able to find a common language with teachers, parents, and students, but the offer still came as a surprise. You will be the first female principal in the history of this school, said Mr. Graham, the chairman of the committee. Then it's time to make history, I replied. Robert was proud of my appointment, although he sometimes joked that there were now two bosses in our family. Brenda was in 8th grade at the time, and at first she was embarrassed that her mother worked at the same school as her. But gradually she got used to it and even began to take pride in the fact that her mom was the most important person in the school. Being a principal required an iron will and diplomatic skills. Every day brought new conflicts that had to be solved. Teachers complained about salaries and workloads. Parents demanded special attention to their children. Students tested the boundaries of what was allowed. The school board was constantly cutting the budget, and the Department of Education was introducing new standards that had to be implemented without additional funding. How do you keep up with everything? Colleagues asked. I plan every minute and don't waste time with doubts, I replied. It was true. I learned to make decisions quickly and take responsibility for them. If a teacher wasn't doing his or her job, I found a way to help or substitute. If a parent was unhappy with a child's grades, I found out why and suggested concrete steps to improve the situation. If a student was misbehaving, I looked at the motivations behind his behavior and chose a punishment that would help him change, not just serve time. During my 23 years as principal, thousands of students passed through my school. Some of them became doctors, teachers, engineers, entrepreneurs. They sometimes wrote me letters, came to visit me, told me about their achievements, and each time I felt that my work had meaning. You're too strict, Brenda would sometimes say when she came to my office after school. I'm fair, I'd correct her. They were different things. Fairness required consistency. You couldn't turn a blind eye to tardiness today and punish the same thing tomorrow. You couldn't make exceptions for the children of powerful parents and be harsher on the rest of us. You couldn't make decisions under emotion or pressure. These principles helped me not only in my work, but also in my life. When Robert got cancer, I organized his treatment as methodically as I planned school activities. I researched all the options, found the best doctors, scheduled treatments and medications. I did not allow myself to panic or despair because I knew that emotions would not help, only the right actions would. Robert lived another 3 years after his diagnosis. 3 years during which I combined my work as a director with caring for my sick husband. Brenda was already in college and only came for vacations. The burden fell on my shoulders, but I coped because I was used to coping. After he died, the house was empty, but it wasn't a stranger. On the contrary, it became completely mine again, as it had been in the early years of my purchase. I could read in the living room late into the night without worrying about waking Robert. I could rearrange the furniture as I wished. I could invite coworkers or girlfriends over without having to coordinate plans with anyone. 5 years ago, on my 65th birthday, I retired. A solemn ceremony in the assembly hall, flowers, speeches, gifts. The new principal, the young and ambitious Mr. Clark, promised to carry on my traditions. Teachers cried. Students gave homemade cards. Parents thanked me for my years of service. "What will you do now?" they asked at the farewell. "Live," I answered. Just live. And I lived. I read the books I'd been putting off for years, tended my garden, met with friends, traveled. Brenda visited me regularly, sometimes staying overnight in her old room. I enjoyed cooking for her, listening to stories about work, giving her advice. I thought we had a good relationship, that my daughter valued our companionship. But today's conversation made me reconsider a lot of things. It turns out Brenda had been planning to evict me from my own home for a long time. And she wasn't doing it with anger, but with the kind of ease with which one plans a new piece of furniture or a vacation. Saturday morning, I was watering flowers on the veranda when Brenda's car pulled up in front of the house. 4 people got out at once. My daughter, Kale, and 2 strange women about Brenda's age. One was a blonde in a bright pink coat. The other was a brunette in jeans and a close-knit sweater. They were chatting and laughing animatedly, clearly in a great mood. "Mom, hi!" Brenda waved at me. "This is Jessica and Haley, my co-workers from the travel agency. I wanted to show them our house. Our house, not even my house or my mom's house. Just our, as if the property had already been divided and I didn't know it yet. It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Clark," the blonde Jessica said, shaking my hand. "Brenda has told me so much about your lovely home." "Yeah, we're just dying of curiosity," Haley added. "Brenda says it's going to be fabulous once it's renovated. I invited everyone in, even though I felt strange being the hostess showing the house to its future occupants." Cale immediately pulled a tape measure and a notebook out of his pocket, as if he were in a business meeting. Brenda led her friends through the rooms, talking enthusiastically about the remodeling plans. "We're going to combine the kitchen with the living room," she said, pointing to the wall between the rooms. "It will be a huge space for cooking and hosting. And here," she pointed to the corner near the window, "there'll be a dining area with a big table." Jessica gasped in delight as she envisioned future house parties. Haley was taking pictures of the interior on her phone, apparently to discuss with her other friends later. I stood nearby and watched my living room turn into a planning site for someone else's life. "What's going to happen to the piano?" Haley asked, walking over to the instrument in the corner. "Oh, we'll take it away," Brenda replied easily. "No one plays it, and it takes up a lot of space. We'll replace it with a big TV and a state-of-the-art sound system." Cale was measuring the walls with a tape measure, jotting down the numbers in his notebook. He worked methodically, like a man who knows exactly what he needs the measurements for. As he went from one wall to the next, he would occasionally stop to take a look at something and write it down again. "Cale, what are you measuring?" Jessica asked. I'm planning a furniture layout, he answered, keeping his eyes on the task at hand. I want to see if the couch we saw at the store will fit in here. And I need room for a desk because I sometimes work from home. How practical, Haley marveled. You've thought of everything so well. We went up to the second floor where the bedrooms were. Brenda opened the door to my room and invited her friends in. This will be our bedroom, she announced. It has the biggest windows and the best light, and there's a walk-in closet that we're planning to expand. I stood on the threshold of my own bedroom and listened to my daughter talk about where she and Cale would put the bed, what curtains they'd hang, how they'd remodel the bathroom. Cale, meanwhile, was measuring the room, especially the window seat. The dresser we picked out will look perfect here, he told Brenda, and the mirror across from the bed will visually maximize the space. Where will your mom live? Jessica asked, and there was genuine interest in her voice. Oh, Mom's moving to Aunt Linda's in Oregon, Brenda answered, as naturally as if it were a matter that had already been decided and discussed. She'll be much better off there. Her aunt lives near the ocean. The climate is milder, and she'll have company. That's wonderful, Haley said. It means you can start your family life over. We went into Brenda's former nursery, which was now the guest room. There was a single bed, a desk, and bookshelves filled with the books I'd once used to study. And this will be the nursery, Brenda announced, a dreamy note in her voice. We want kids a year or two after we get married, so we need to think ahead. Cale had already measured this room too, apparently envisioning where the crib, changing table, and play area would be. Brenda's friends were enthusiastically discussing color schemes for the nursery, suggesting neutral tones that would suit both boy and girl. You have such specific plans, Jessica remarked. It's so nice when young people are serious about family. We are really serious, Cale confirmed. And we want our children to grow up in a comfortable environment, in a house that will be fully adapted to family life. Once downstairs, we made our way into the kitchen, where Brenda continued her tour narrative. We're planning a complete remodel here, she said, pointing to a wall of old cabinets, new appliances, modern countertops, maybe a kitchen island in the center. Cale opened cabinet doors, peered into the oven, checked the faucets. He surveyed the kitchen with the look of an expert assessing the front of the work to be done. The plumbing's going to have to be replaced, he said. And the electrical wiring, too. Older houses always have these problems. But that's not a problem, is it? Haley asked. As long as the foundation is good. Of course it's not a problem, agreed Brenda. We'd already started saving up for the repairs. Cale had even put together a detailed estimate. So not only were they planning to take over my house, but they were already calculating the cost of remodeling it. I wondered if they'd factored my opinion into those plans, or if they'd considered it an unimportant detail. We returned to the living room, where Cale finished his measurements and tucked the tape measure into his pocket. Brenda's friend sat down on the couch, continuing to admire the house and the plans for its renovation. Sandra, would you be okay with such a drastic change? Jessica suddenly asked. The question caught me off guard. During the whole tour, no one had asked my opinion about the renovation plans. Everyone talked as if the decision had already been made, and all I had to do was accept it and vacate the property. I think everyone should live in the house they own, I said cautiously. Yeah, sure, Haley agreed. But it'll be their home after the wedding, right? A young family needs its own space. Space is important, I confirmed. The only question is whose space it is. Brenda looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression, as if she didn't know where I was going with this. Cale continued to study the notes in his notebook, pretending not to hear our conversation. Mom, we talked about this, Brenda said in a conciliatory tone. You said yourself that after retirement you wanted to travel more, to see Aunt Linda. I did talk about traveling and visiting my sister, But that didn't mean I was going to leave my own home forever and hand it over to my daughter and her fiancé. You can travel when you come home, I said. But why do you need such a big house? Brenda asked, a note of irritation in her voice. You're alone? You don't need that much space. Kale and I could use every room. The logic was simple. If I lived alone, I wasn't entitled to a big house. Since they're planning a family, they automatically get priority on my property. A convenient philosophy for those who want someone else's property without paying for it. The house is very cozy, Jessica said, clearly trying to ease the tension that was starting to build. And it looks well cared for. Yes, I've lived here for almost 30 years, I said. I've done a lot of things with my own hands. Cale lifted his head from his notebook and looked at me with renewed interest. 30 years is a long time, he said. There's probably a lot of things that need updating. Old houses need constant investment. This house is in excellent condition, I objected. I've made regular repairs, changed things that need replacing. Well, yes, but still, Cale continued. After 30 years, any house is obsolete. You need modern solutions, new technologies. So my house is obsolete, and that gives them the right to take it back and remodel it to their liking. And the fact that I bought it, paid the mortgage, invested money and effort in its arrangement does not matter. Brenda's friends stayed with us for another hour or so, discussing the details of the upcoming renovation and sharing design ideas. They were genuinely happy for Brenda and Cale, wishing them happiness in their new home. It never occurred to any of them that this house might be left to the old mistress. When the guests finally left, the house was quiet again. But now this silence seemed different to me. Not calm and peaceful, but wary, as if the house also realized that its future was being decided without its consent. On Sunday night, Brenda called and suggested a family dinner. She had that special cheerfulness in her voice that I remembered from when I was a kid. The way she'd say when she wanted something important but didn't dare ask for it directly. Mom, Cale and I have some plans we'd like to discuss, she said. Why don't you cook something special? You know how much Cale loves your roast. Cale really always liked my beef roast with vegetables. It was one of the few dishes that made him forget about eating right and living a healthy lifestyle. I agreed, even though I realized that dinner would be something of a negotiation, not just a family get-together. I spent the whole day cooking, choosing the best cuts of meat, carefully chopping vegetables, selecting spices. Maybe good food would help create a friendlier atmosphere for conversation. Or maybe I was just distracting myself from the anxious thoughts that had been lingering since last week. They arrived at 7 sharp, as agreed. Brenda was wearing a new blue dress I hadn't seen before, and Cale was wearing a shirt and jacket, like he was going to a business meeting. Both looked a little tense, but determined at the same time. Oh, it smells, Brenda exclaimed, kissing me on the cheek. I was imagining eating your roast on the way home. Sandra, you've outdone yourself as always, Cale added, smelling the aromas coming from the kitchen. I hope you made a double batch. We sat down at the dining room table, which I'd set with a ceremonial tablecloth and the best service. The crystal glasses reflected the light of the chandelier. The silverware gleamed on the snow-white cloth. Perhaps it was excessive for an ordinary family dinner, but something told me tonight was going to be special. The first half hour passed in the usual conversations. Brenda talked about work, about the new tour to Europe their agency was developing. Cale shared his impressions of a recent project his programming team was working on. I listened and kept the conversation going, but felt that all of this was just a prelude to the main conversation. Mom, do you remember when we used to have family dinners like this? Brenda asked, putting a bite of roast in her mouth. You, Dad, and I used to sit around this table and talk about important events. I remember, I replied. Your father loved it when we all got together. Yes, he always said that family was the most important thing, Brenda continued, a sentimental note in her voice, and that you should support each other in every circumstance. Cale nodded, agreeing with those wise words. He cut the meat into neat slices, clearly enjoying the flavor, but I noticed that he exchanged meaningful glances with Brenda from time to time. By the way, Mom, Brenda said as we moved on to dessert, we wanted to talk to you about the wedding. I'm listening, I replied as I poured coffee into cups. We've decided that we want to get married next June, Brenda announced with a smile. Cale has already found a beautiful place for the ceremony, a restaurant by the lake, very romantic. That's wonderful, I said. June is a good time to get married. Yes, and we've already started planning our honeymoon, Cale added. We want to go to Italy, see Tuscany, Venice. Brenda has always dreamed of Italy. And when we get back from our trip, we'll start setting up our family life, Brenda continued. You know, just a normal young family, plans for the future, children. She said it like she was talking about moving to another city or buying a new car. Ordinary, natural, unobjectionable. And we thought, Cale said, sipping his coffee, that you might be interested in our future. Very interesting, I confirmed. Well, first of all, we're going to need more space, Brenda began. This house is perfect for a young family. It's big, it's cozy, it's in a good neighborhood. And we've already thought of everything, Cale added. Why? Where our bedroom will be, where the nursery will be, how to remodel the first floor for convenience. And most importantly, Brenda leaned across the table to me. We know you'd be much better off living on your own. You said yourself that you wanted to try something new when you retired. New doesn't necessarily mean moving out of your own home, I said. But Mom, Brenda looked at me with a slight perplexed expression. You do realize that a young family needs independence, right? We can't start a life together living with our parents. It's inconvenient for us and for you, especially when the kids come, Cal said. The house will be filled with noise, toys, and worries. At your age, it can be exhausting. My age. So, at 70, I'm too old to live in my own house if it interferes with the plans of the young. And Aunt Linda invites you over so often, Brenda continued. Do you remember at Christmas, she said how lonely she was in that big house by the ocean? She could so use some company. And Oregon has a milder climate, Cale added. That's important for older people. Less strain on the heart, easier to breathe. Older people. Now I'm not just old, I'm elderly, and I need a special climate and medical supervision. We've even talked to Aunt Linda, Brenda admitted. She'd be happy to have you stay with her. She says you can garden together, read books, go on retirement trips. So they'd already discussed my future with Aunt Linda without letting me know. Planning my life, like planning next week's menu or vacation itinerary. And then, Cale leaned forward, adopting a more trusting tone. We think you might benefit from a change of scenery. You've been spending too much time alone since Robert's death, and with Linda, you'll have constant companionship. Yes, and you'll be able to help her around the house, said Brenda. You know how important it is to feel needed at any age, to feel needed. I mean, I won't be needed in my own home, but I'll be useful as an au pair at Aunt Linda's. And we'll visit you, Brenda promised. We'll come every vacation, and the children will know their grandmother when they come. It would be great if the grandchildren could spend their summers by the sea, Cale agreed. Fresh air, nature, it's good for their development. So I'll be a handy nanny grandmother who lives in a suitable place for children's vacations, and the house their mother grew up in will become a family nest for the new owners. We realize it's a big decision, Brenda said, covering my hand with her palm. But we're sure it's the best thing for everyone. You'll get new experiences. We'll get a chance to build a family. Aunt Linda will get company. Everyone wins, Cale summarized with a satisfied smile. I looked at both of them, handsome, young, and confident. They genuinely thought they were offering me a boon. There was no malice or greed in their eyes, just a conviction that their plan was perfect for everyone involved. What if I don't want to move? I asked. Brenda and Cale looked at each other, clearly not expecting such a question. But why wouldn't you want to? Brenda wondered. We explained everything. You'll be much better off with Aunt Linda. What if I like it better here? Mom, what are you saying? Brenda frowned slightly. You're a reasonable person. You can't not realize that a young family needs its own space. Own space is the key word, I agreed. Exactly, Cale said, happy to see that I was starting to agree. Every family should have their own home where they can build a future without looking at others. Sandra, he looked at me seriously. You've lived a wonderful life in this house, raised a daughter, built a career, started a family with Robert, but now it's time to pass the baton to the next generation. It's the natural order of things, the natural order of things. The way they see it, I have to step down willingly, like an actress who finishes her role and walks off the stage to make way for new performers. We're not rushing you into a decision, Brenda said conciliatingly. The wedding isn't until June, so you have time to think about it and prepare. But we hope you'll realize that this really is the best option for everyone. Dinner was coming to an end. Cale helped clean up the dishes, praising my cooking skills and joking about Brenda having to learn to cook just as well. Brenda laughed, promising to borrow all the recipes from me. The atmosphere was friendly and relaxed, as if we were just discussing family vacation plans, not my eviction from my own home. As they were about to leave, Brenda gave me a big hug on the doorstep. Mom, I know you'll make the right decision, she whispered in my ear. You've always been wise and understanding. Wise and understanding. So if I say no to their plan, I'm automatically a stupid and uncomprehending mother who is interfering with my daughter's happiness. The next day, I decided to talk to Brenda alone, without Cale. Maybe without his presence, my daughter would be more open to discussion. I called her at the travel agent's office and asked her to meet me after work. Mom, what's wrong? Brenda asked, a touch of concern in her voice. You sound kind of serious. I want to talk to you about our plans from yesterday, I replied. There are some things I'd like to discuss. Oh, Mom. Brenda laughed with relief. I thought something had happened. Sure, let's meet. Only I'm really busy today. We have a presentation of the new tour. Why don't you just come over to my house tonight? We can have tea and talk about it. Brenda rented a small apartment in the center of Mount Rainier, in a modern complex with a concierge and a gym. She had lived at home for a while after university, but then decided that a young girl needed independence. I supported her decision then, believing that living independently would help her grow up and learn to take responsibility. I arrived at her house around 7 in the evening. Brenda met me in homemade clothes, soft jeans and a sweater, with her hair gathered in a careless bundle. She looked tired after a day at work, but content. Come on in, Mom. She kissed me on the cheek. I just made your favorite green tea. And I bought some cookies from that bakery you mentioned. Brenda's apartment always amazed me with its impeccable cleanliness and order. Everything was in its place. There wasn't a speck of dust or an extra item. Modern furniture, neutral colors, minimum of decor. Everything looked like in an interior design magazine. How was the presentation? I asked, making myself comfortable on the sofa. Great, Brenda perked up. The clients were thrilled with our new itinerary in the Balkans. Imagine, we included not only the classic cities, but also some completely unknown places, authentic cuisine, traditional crafts, stunning scenery. She narrated with enthusiasm, waving her arms and making plans for the future. At times like this, Brenda reminded me of myself when I was younger, the same passion for new projects, the same ability to spark ideas. What about Kale? I asked. Does he mind that you're working so hard? Oh, he's totally supportive, Brenda said. He says that once I'm married, I'll be able to spend more time on my career because I won't have to worry about traveling to my parents' house and family obligations. Family obligations. So she saw our meetings as an obligation, not a pleasure. Brenda, I decided to move on to the main topic. I'd like to talk about last night's conversation. What's there to talk about? She smiled. I thought it was pretty clear. We've told you our plans, explained why we think they're reasonable. Yes, but I have questions about those plans. What kind of questions? Brenda poured tea into fine china cups. If there's something bothering you, we can discuss it. What bothers me is that you are planning my life without asking my opinion. Brenda stopped with teapot in hand, looked at me with genuine bewilderment. Mom, what are you talking about? It's not like we're planning your life. We're just suggesting an option that would be convenient for everyone. An option that would require me to leave my own home and move in with Aunt Linda. What's wrong with that? Brenda sat down next to me, setting her cup on the coffee table. Aunt Linda will be pleased, you won't be bored, and we'll get a chance to start a family in a comfortable environment. What if I don't want to move? Brenda sighed, the way one sighs when one has to explain the obvious. Mom, you're a reasonable person. You realize this house is too big for one person. You're the one who complained that sometimes you feel lonely in those empty rooms. I did talk about loneliness sometimes, especially in the first year after Robert died. But that didn't mean I was ready to give up the house and move to the other side of the country. Loneliness is no reason to give up property, I said. But Mom, Brenda took my hand, you can see how serious Cale and I are. We're not just dating, we're making plans for the future. We really need a house where we can start a family. Then buy your own house. Mom, Brenda jerked her hand away, a note of irritation in her voice. You know how real estate prices are these days. We're saving money, but it takes a lot of money to buy a nice house in a decent neighborhood. So it's easier to get a ready-made house without paying for it. What are you talking about? Brenda looked at me indignantly. Nobody's charging anything. It's a family home, and it's supposed to pass from parent to child. It passes when the parents die, and as long as the parents are alive, they have the right to control their property. Brenda got up from the couch, walked to the window, and stood there for a few seconds, looking out at the evening lights of the city. When she turned around, her face was a mixture of resentment and incomprehension. Mom, I don't understand what's going on, she said. Yesterday you were fine with our plans, and today you're acting like we're proposing something terrible. Yesterday I was just listening. Today I'm thinking about it. What are you so upset about? Brenda came back to me and sat on the edge of the couch. We explained everything. You get a new life with your sister. We get a chance to start a family. What's the problem? The problem is that I own the house, not you. Mom, what does this have to do with formalities? Brenda waved her hand as if warding off a pesky fly. Family isn't about paperwork and ownership. It's about love and mutual support. Exactly. And if you love me, you should know you can't evict your mother from her own home. Nobody's evicting you. Brenda was outraged. We're offering you a wonderful alternative, a house by the sea, constant company, new experiences. And if I don't like it? Brenda was silent for a moment, pondering my question. Then she took a cup of tea, drank a few sips, put it back. Mom, what exactly are you unhappy with? She asked in a calmer tone. Maybe we can change something in the plans. I don't like the fact that you're running my life without my consent. But we are asking, Brenda objected. We're not confronting you with the fact. We're explaining our vision and asking you to understand us. You're explaining a decision you've already made. That's not the same thing as asking for an opinion. Brenda stood up again, this time walked over to the bookshelf, picked up the picture of her and me at her graduation from university. She stared at the picture for a long time, then put it back down. You know, Mom, she said without turning around, I think you're just afraid of change. It's understandable. At your age, people often become conservative. At my age, there's that wording again, which should explain and justify my reluctance to give up the house. It's not about age, it's about ownership, I replied. Mom, enough with the legal technicalities. Brenda turned around, irritation burning in her eyes. We are a family, and in a family, everything should be decided by justice, not by documents. And how exactly does justice require that I give you the house? What is fair is that a young family gets a chance to live well, and an elderly person gets a peaceful old age in suitable conditions. Older person. So, at 38, Brenda considers herself young and needy, and me at 70, elderly and obliged to make room. What if I didn't have a home? I asked. What would you do then? Brenda froze, clearly not expecting such a question. Well, then, we'd rent or take out a mortgage, she replied after a pause. Exactly, and no one would be evicted from their own home. But you have a house, Brenda exclaimed, and it's big, and we need it, and you don't need it all. Who says I don't need it? Mom, be realistic. You live alone in a 4-bedroom house. Isn't that a waste? Wasteful. So, it's a waste to live in your own house if someone else needs it more. Brenda. I got up from the couch, realizing this conversation was stalling. I don't think we have the same understanding of the situation. Yeah, I think so too, she agreed. For some reason, you see our proposal as something bad, and we really want everyone to be happy. Everyone but me. Mom, what are you talking about? Brenda came over to me and put her arm around my shoulders. You're going to have a great time at Aunt Linda's. She's so excited for you to move in. I don't remember agreeing to move. All right. Brenda pulled away and looked into my eyes. Let's do this. Think it over calmly. Weigh the pros and cons. I'm sure you'll realize that our plan is really the most sensible. And if I don't? You will, Brenda said confidently. You're a smart woman and a loving mother, and loving mothers always want their children to be happy. Loving mothers. So if I rejected their plan, I would automatically cease to be a loving mother. I was about to leave, realizing that further conversation was futile. Brenda walked me to the door, still smiling and hoping I would get it right. Mom, don't worry so much about the little things. She said goodbye. It'll all work out, you'll see. The little things. She considered the ownership of the house I'd lived in for almost 30 years a small thing. Thursday night, I was watering the flowers on the porch when Cale's car pulled up in front of the house. He came out alone, without Brenda, which was unusual. He usually only came to my house when my daughter was with him, as if he needed her presence as a pass to enter foreign territory. Hi, Sandra, he said, coming up the porch steps. Can I talk to you? Sure, I replied, though his unexpected visit was unsettling. Come on inside. Cale was dressed in a dark suit, clearly coming straight from work. He was carrying a leather briefcase, which he set at the entrance to the living room. His movements were confident, but there was tension in his eyes, as if he were preparing for an important conversation. Is Brenda home? He asked, looking around the room. No, she's at work, I answered. Didn't you two have an appointment? No, I came here on purpose when I knew she wouldn't be here, Cale admitted. I wanted to talk to you alone. He went into the living room, but he didn't sit down, instead standing by the fireplace with his hands behind his back. There was something solemn in that posture, as if he were preparing to make a speech. Sandra, I realize that our conversation on Sunday may have seemed unexpected, he began gently. And Brenda told me about your conversation yesterday. So my daughter shared the details of our conversation with her fiancé. I wonder how she interpreted my objections to their plan. What exactly did she say? I asked. That you were worried about moving, Cale answered, and that you had doubts about our plans. Doubts. He called my reluctance to give up my own house doubts. Cale, have a seat, I offered, but he shook his head. I'd rather stand if you don't mind. What I have to say is pretty important. He paused for a moment to collect his thoughts, then looked me straight in the eye. Sandra, I have a lot of respect for you as a person and as Brenda's mother. You've raised a wonderful daughter. You've had a successful career. You've accomplished a lot in life. Thank you, I said neutrally, waiting for her to continue. But now is the time to look to the future. Cale continued, his voice getting firmer. Brenda and I are serious about starting a family. This isn't child's play or a temporary fling. We plan on living together for the rest of our lives, raising children, building careers. That's commendable, I replied. And we need the right conditions for that. Cale stepped forward, his posture more commanding. A young family can't develop properly if there's a third person in the house, especially from the older generation. A third person. From the older generation. So, in my own home, I became redundant. You see, Sandra? Cale paced the room as if he were giving a lecture. Each generation has its own life cycle. You've completed your cycle. You raised your daughter, built your career, buried your husband. Now your job is to make room for the next generation. Make room. Like old furniture being taken out to put in new furniture. What if I think my life cycle is not yet complete? I asked. Cale paused, looking at me with a look of mild bewilderment, as if he'd heard something unexpected. What do you mean? He asked. I mean that at 70, you can have plans and desires that don't involve making room for the young. Of course you can, Cale agreed condescendingly. At Aunt Linda's you could garden, read books, maybe find some kind of retirement hobby. Retirement hobbies. So, my life should become a set of harmless hobbies for seniors. What if I want to continue living in my own home? I asked. Cale sighed, the way one sighs when one has to explain obvious things to a stubborn child. Sandra, you're a reasonable woman. You realize the house is too big for one person. And then, he paused, choosing his words, Brenda is entitled to inherit. After I die, yes. But why wait until she's dead? Cale spread his hands wide. You can give your daughter a wonderful gift now by giving her the house. Imagine how happy she'll be. Imagine how happy I'd be if I had a roof over my head. But you'll have a roof over your head, Cale objected. Aunt Linda has a great house, and she'll be glad of the company. It won't be my house. Sandra. Cale moved closer, and now there was a metallic note in his voice. I tried to explain the situation nicely, but if you don't understand, then I'll be blunt. He stopped right in front of me, arms crossed over his chest. His face was hard and his gaze was cold. After the wedding, you have to disappear from our family, he said loud and clear. I don't want a mother-in-law who interferes in our lives, gives advice, controls our every move. A young family needs independence, to disappear from their family. He said it so calmly, as if it was a question of moving furniture or changing the plumbing. You see, Sandra, Cale went on, clearly encouraged by the fact that he had finally put it straight. I'm not the kind of man who will tolerate the interference of relatives in his family life. I'm the head of the family, and I make the decisions. Does Brenda know about your views on family relationships? Brenda understands and supports me, Cale replied confidently. She is a modern woman who knows that a man should be the leader in the family. And this leader decided to evict my daughter from her parents' home? This leader decided to provide his family with normal living conditions, Kale corrected. And the parents' home is the past. The future is being built on new territory, free from the influence of previous generations. A new territory? My house should become their new territory, and I should disappear so I wouldn't get in the way of the future. Kale, I said calmly, what happens if I refuse to disappear? He looked at me in surprise, as if he couldn't believe that anyone could disagree with his logical plan. You won't, he said confidently, because you love your daughter and want her to be happy. And if I do? Kale was silent for a moment, thinking about my question. Then he smiled, but it was cold and unpleasant. Then life would be very uncomfortable for everyone, he said. Brenda will be torn between her husband and her mother. I'll feel uncomfortable in a house where I'm not wanted. You'll feel unwanted in your own home. But the house will still be mine. Sandra. Cale leaned toward me, lowering his voice. You realize that formal possession of the deed isn't everything. If a young family wants to live in the house and an older woman is in the way, sooner or later the older woman will have to give in. That sounds like a threat. It sounds like reality, Cale corrected. I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining how life works. He straightened up, smoothed his jacket, resumed his official look. Sandra, I hope you understand what I'm saying. I don't want to ruin things with you or Brenda, but I have a clear vision of what my family life should look like, and that vision has no room for outsiders. Outsiders. Now I'm an outsider in my own daughter's life. So what do you suggest? I asked, still maintaining my calm tone. I'm suggesting that you voluntarily make the decision that's best for everyone, Cale replied. Move in with Aunt Linda, give the house to Brenda, and be allowed to live the rest of your life without complicating your relationship with your daughter. The rest of my life. So, at 70, all I have to do is live out the rest of my life without claiming to be an active participant in what's going on. And if I don't accept this generous offer, you'll be forced to watch your daughter slowly drift away from you, Cale said stiffly, because I will not allow my wife to be intimate with a man who interferes with our marital happiness. He walked over to the briefcase he had left by the entrance, picked it up. Sandra, you have until our wedding to make the right decision, he said as he headed for the exit. I hope you act wisely and don't ruin the young people's party with your stubbornness. He reached the door and turned around. And, he added, I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't tell Brenda what we talked about. Why upset the girl before the wedding? She's already worried that you're not too excited about her happiness. She's worried that I'm not making her happy. So now I'm a bad mother who can't be happy about her daughter's plans to evict her from her own home. Goodbye, Sandra, Cale said and walked out. I was alone in the living room, where the smell of his expensive cologne and his confident words that I should disappear from my own daughter's life had not long ago lingered. The house around me had been quiet and peaceful, but now something new could be heard in that silence, the sound of war being declared. After Cale left, I sat in the living room for a long time, pondering his words. Disappear from their family. The phrase sounded like a drumbeat in my head. I'd lived for 70 years, run a school for over 2 decades, made tough decisions every day, but never before had I encountered such blatant boorishness clothed in the form of concern for the family's well-being. By morning, the plan had matured. Years as a principal had taught me to act quickly and decisively when a situation called for immediate intervention. If Cale wanted the house without regard for my opinion, he would learn the lesson that property belongs to the person whose name is on the deeds. At 9 in the morning, I called Helen Stone, the realtor who had helped sell my late neighbor Mrs. Garwood's house 3 years ago. Helen was known around town as a professional who could find buyers quickly and get deals done in no time. Sandra, she was delighted when I called. What a pleasant surprise. How are you? How's your health? Thank you, Helen. I'm fine, I replied. I'm calling about a business matter. I want to sell the house. There was a pause. Helen probably didn't expect to hear this from a woman who had lived in her house for almost 30 years. You want to sell your house? She asked again. And where do you plan to move to? That's not important for now, I answered. What's important is how quickly the deal can be finalized. Well, it depends on many factors, Helen said carefully. You have to appraise it, prepare the documents, find a buyer, agree on terms. It usually takes 2 to 4 months. I need it faster. How much faster? Ideally by the end of next week. Helen laughed, thinking I was joking. Sandra, that's impossible. Even if there was a cash buyer tomorrow, the paperwork would take at least a month. Then find a way to speed up the process, I said firmly. I have my reasons for hurrying. Helen's voice took on a professional tone. She realized I was serious. All right, let's meet this afternoon. I'll inspect the house, do a preliminary assessment, explain what can be expedited. I'll expect you at 3 o'clock. The next call was to David Cole, the lawyer who had helped me draft the will after Robert's death. David worked for a small but respectable firm and specialized in family law and real estate transactions. Mrs. Clark, it's good to hear from you, he said. Is something wrong? David, I need to sell the house very quickly. How long will it take to prepare all the legal documents? It depends on the circumstances of the transaction, David answered. If the buyer is willing, if there are no encumbrances on the property, if... Mrs. Clark, may I ask why there's such a rush? Family reasons, I answered succinctly. We need to move quickly. I understand. In principle, with all the documents and the agreed price, it is possible to meet in 10 days, but it will cost more because of the accelerated processing. Money's not a problem. Can you start the paperwork today? Sure, but I'll need to know the details of the deal. You'll know the details tonight. The realtor will appraise the house in 3 hours. Then I'll contact you. After I talked to the lawyer, I made a few more calls. My years in the school system had given me extensive connections in city government. I knew people in the real estate records department, the tax office, and the banks. Many of them were either former students of mine, parents of students, or colleagues in the educational system. I called Thomas Miller, who worked in the real estate registration department. Thomas was the father of 3 children who attended my school and always treated me with great respect. Mrs. Clark, he cheered. How are you doing? The children often reminisce about their school days, especially Sarah. She says you're the best principal she's ever known. Thank you, Thomas. Tell Sarah I said hello. I have a business question for you. Is it possible to expedite the registration of a real estate transaction? In principle, if you have a good reason, Thomas replied. Normally it takes 7 working days, but in special cases it can be reduced to 3 or 4. Great, maybe I'll see you next week. Of course, Mrs. Clark. Always ready to help. Next was a call to the bank where I've had an account for years. The manager, Patricia Lewis, was also connected to the school. Her younger brother was a student of ours, and he had behavioral problems that we worked through together. Mrs. Clark, what a pleasant surprise. Patricia said hello. How are you? Jeremy is still thanking you for helping him at school. I'm glad to hear that Jeremy's doing well. Patricia, how quickly can you process a large bank transaction when it comes to real estate sales? If the amount does not exceed certain limits and all the documents are in order, then within a working day, said Patricia. And if it's more than that, then 2 days at the most. That's fine. I may need your help next week. Feel free to contact me anytime, Mrs. Clark. By lunchtime, I'd drawn up a plan of action. All the right people had been alerted. All the procedures could be expedited thanks to my connections in the city. All I had to do was find a buyer willing to pay cash and not delay the closing. At exactly 3 o'clock, Helen's car pulled up to the house. She got out with a clipboard, tape measure, and camera, clearly in the mood for serious work. Sandra, she said as she climbed the veranda steps, I've been thinking about your call all the way up. What happened? Why such a rush? Family emergency. I repeated the wording I'd used this morning. We have to get out of the house quickly. Helen looked at me carefully, but didn't ask any further questions. Her professional ethics prevented her from prying into her clients' private lives. We spent the next 2 hours touring the house room by room. Helen measured square footage, photographed the interior, made notes on the state of repairs, plumbing, and electrical wiring. She was meticulous and methodical, never missing a detail. The house is in excellent condition, she said when the inspection was over. You can see that it has been well cared for. The renovations are modern and all the utilities are in order. What's the price? Given the market value in the area, the square footage, the condition, and the location. Helen did a quick calculation in her mind. Between $550,000 and $600,000. And if you need to sell very quickly, then you'd have to reduce the price by 10 to 15%. A quick sale always means a discount for the buyer. How long would it take to find a buyer if the price was attractive? Helen thought for a moment. I have several clients who are looking for a house in this particular neighborhood. If I put the price at $480,000, I could find a buyer as soon as tomorrow, especially if it's a cash investor. That's great. Start looking. Sandra, Helen hesitated. Are you sure you want to sell? It's a very big decision. Maybe you should think about it some more. I've already thought about it. Go ahead. When Helen left, I called David Cole and gave him all the information about the proposed transaction. He promised to have all the necessary documents ready by Monday. Mrs. Clark, he said before hanging up, I know it's none of my business, but such quick decisions about selling real estate are sometimes made under the influence of emotion. Maybe we should take a break, think it over again. David, I made decisions for 23 years running a school. I know the difference between emotional impulses and deliberate action. This is a considered action. All right, then I'll get started on the paperwork. In the evening, I sat in my office, where I used to prepare for school boards and plan curricula. On the desk were the house deeds I had pulled out of the safe, certificate of ownership, certificates of no encumbrances, technical passport. Everything was in perfect order, ready for a quick sale. I picked up the property certificate and carefully read it again. Clark Sandra Jane, owner of the dwelling house. My name, my rights, my property. Property that Cale wanted to take from me under the pretense of taking care of a young family. 28 years ago, I bought this house, dreaming of family happiness and a cozy hearth. Now it was time to sell it to teach a lesson to those who thought they could dispose of other people's property as they saw fit. Saturday morning, Helen called with the news. Sandra, I have a buyer. Her voice sounded excited. An investment company that's buying up properties in the area. They're willing to pay $470,000 in cash and close the deal on Monday. I'll take the offer. You sure about this? Maybe we should haggle. No, I want speed, not top dollar. Everything went according to plan. By Monday night, the house would be sold and I'd receive the closing documents. All I had to do was wait for the right time to surprise Brenda and Cale. Monday morning, I got up at 6 a.m., just like the old days when I was preparing for an important teacher's council or a meeting with the inspectors from the Department of Education. It was drizzling outside the window, turning the October leaves into a slippery mess beneath the feet of the few passers-by. Mount Rainier woke up slowly, reluctantly, as if it too sensed that this day would be a turning point. By 10 o'clock, all the parties to the deal had gathered in David Cole's office. The representative of the investment company, Mr. Banks, was a businesslike middle-aged man in an impeccable gray suit. He came with a leather briefcase full of documents and a briefcase containing neat stacks of bills. "Mrs. Clark," he said, shaking my hand, "I'm glad we could come to an agreement so quickly. Your house made an excellent impression on our appraisers. The signing procedure took less than an hour." David methodically read out each clause of the contract, explained the legal wording, and made sure the paperwork was correct. I signed the papers one by one, feeling strangely light, as if I had lifted a heavy weight off my shoulders. "Congratulations on a successful transaction," Mr. Banks said when the last document was signed and certified. "The house becomes our property as of today. When do you plan to vacate the premises?" "By tonight," I answered. "I don't have much stuff." He nodded understandingly. Investment companies are used to dealing with people who need to sell real estate quickly for various reasons. At the bank, Patricia Lewis personally handled depositing the money into my account. $470,000 had transformed me from an ordinary retiree to a woman with a substantial amount of money. Not a rich woman, but someone who could afford financial independence for years to come. "Mrs. Clark," Patricia said as she printed out the account statement, "if you need advice on investing this amount, our bank offers a variety of programs for retirees." "Thank you, Patricia. I'll certainly look into the suggestions, but first I have more pressing matters to attend to." When I got home, I started packing. It was strange how few truly important things there were after nearly 30 years of living in this house. Clothes, books, a few photos, documents, Robert's jewelry, all of it fit into 3 suitcases and a few boxes. I decided to keep the furniture and most of the household items. The new owners could dispose of them as they saw fit, sell them, donate them, or throw them away. I no longer needed these witnesses to my past life. I packed the photographs especially carefully. Wedding pictures with Robert, baby pictures of Brenda, family vacations, high school graduations. Our entire family history fit into a small shoebox. By 3 p.m., the packing was complete. The house that had belonged to me that morning now looked empty and alien. The echo of footsteps echoed through the rooms, reminding me that life here was over. I sat down at the dining room table and wrote a letter. A long, detailed letter explaining my decision, why I'd sold the house, why I was leaving, what I thought of Cale's behavior, and Brenda's silence. It took me a long time to write, rereading it, correcting the wording. I wanted every word to be balanced and precise. Then she took out an envelope and enclosed several documents, a certificate of sale of the house, listing the new owners, a lease agreement for a small downtown apartment in Brenda's name I'd paid a year in advance, the details of the bank account into which I'd transferred $50,000 as a wedding gift to the young people, and a letter explaining what was happening. On the envelope I wrote, "To Brenda and Cale, open immediately," in large, clear letters, so there would be no doubt as to the importance of the contents. At 4 o'clock, the cab I'd ordered for the train station arrived. The driver, an elderly man with a good-natured face, helped me load my suitcases into the trunk. "How far are you going?" he asked as he pulled out of his seat. "To Oregon, to my sister's," I said, looking back at the house one last time. "It's good to have a family that will be there for you in times of need," the driver said philosophically. "Yeah, it's really good." The train to Portland left at 6 o'clock in the evening. I had time to drink coffee in the station cafe and think about what had happened. The decision had been spontaneous, influenced by my conversation with Cale, but now I knew it was the right one. Years of working as a principal had taught me to distinguish between people who respected other people's boundaries and those who were used to getting what they wanted at any cost. Cale was definitely in the latter category. His words that I should disappear from their family showed his true attitude toward the older generation. Brenda, the daughter, was more difficult. She wasn't overtly aggressive like her fiancé, but her silence and unwillingness to listen to my position spoke volumes. Perhaps she truly believed she was doing the right thing by caring about her family's future. Or maybe she just didn't want to ruin her relationship with her fiancé because of her mother's stubbornness. Either way, now they'll get what they wanted, a house without my presence. Only this house no longer belongs to our family, and the money from its sale will allow me to live independently, not depending on someone's favor or patience. I called Aunt Linda only in the morning, having already bought a train ticket. I didn't want to embarrass my sister if she couldn't receive me. Sandra? Linda was surprised. What's the emergency? You never make spontaneous decisions. It happens, I replied. Can you take me in for a while? Of course, darling. I'd be glad of the company. But what's wrong? Is everything all right with your health? My health's fine. I'm just getting a change of scenery. All right, Linda agreed, though she sounded curious. When are you coming? Tonight? Tonight? Sandra, you're scaring me. What happened? I'll tell you when I see you. Will you meet me at the train station? Of course I will. The train comes at 11 p.m.? Yes, 11:05. At 6:30, I arrived at my former home. It belonged to an investment company now, but it looked exactly the same. White walls, green roof, neat front lawn. Only now it wasn't my hideout, just the building that had once served as my home. I put the envelope between the door and the jamb so that it was sure to fall out when someone opened the door. Brenda usually came here on Saturdays, which meant she'd find my message in 5 days. 5 days is enough time for me to drive to Oregon, get settled in at Linda's, and mentally prepare myself for the inevitable phone calls from my daughter. 5 days for young people to savor the anticipation of soon taking possession of the family nest. Standing on the porch of the house where most of my adult life had been spent, I felt no regret, only a strange relief, as if a heavy backpack had fallen from my shoulders after a long hike. The years of fighting for this house, the mortgage payments, the repairs, the taking care of every detail, it was all in the past. Now I didn't have a home, but I had freedom. Freedom to live where I wanted, to socialize with those who respected me, to make decisions based on my own interests rather than having to please my relatives. The cab driver, the same good-natured man, agreed to wait for me and take me back to the station. He was silent the whole way, apparently sensing my mood. Only when we reached the platform, he asked, "Will everything be all right?" "Yes," I answered confidently. "Everything will be all right." The train was leaving right on schedule. I took the window seat and watched the lights of Mount Rainier slowly fade into the darkness. Somewhere out there, in one of the lighted windows, Brenda and Cale were making plans for their future in a house that already belonged to other people. In a few days, they would find out about it and perhaps realize that ownership was not an empty sound, but a real force. Saturday was sunny, and Brenda decided to stop by her mother's house to discuss the final details of the wedding reception. Cale sat behind the wheel of their new car, tapping his fingers on the dashboard to the beat of the music playing. He was in a great mood. He'd gotten a bonus at work for a successfully completed project, and a weekend with his fiancée loomed ahead. "I hope Mom finally agreed to our plans," Brenda said, fixing her makeup in the mirror. "I'm tired of this endless talk about the house." "She'll agree," Cale said confidently. She just hadn't had time to think it over. Women at her age are slower to make decisions. "Do you think she'll really go to Aunt Linda's? Does she have a choice?" Cale shrugged. Sooner or later, she'd have to face reality. As they pulled up to the house, Brenda immediately noticed that her mother's car wasn't in the driveway. That was odd. Usually on Saturday mornings, Sandra was home, gardening or doing chores. "Maybe she's at the store," Cale suggested, parking on the sidewalk. They climbed the porch steps, and Brenda pressed the bell. The melody echoed inside the house, but no one answered. She tried again, then pulled out her keys. "Mom, we're here," Brenda shouted, opening the door. The envelope fell at her feet with a muffled rustle. Heavy paper, neat handwriting, a serious inscription. To Brenda and Cale, "Open immediately." "What is it?" Cale bent down and picked up the envelope from the floor. "I don't know." Brenda took the envelope from his hands, twirling it in her palms. Mom's handwriting, but why did she leave the letter by the door? They walked into the living room, and Brenda stopped short. The room looked strangely empty. It was missing the small items that were always on the shelves: framed photographs, mementos, books. The coffee table was wiped clean, the sofa cushions neatly spread out, like a house being prepared for sale. "Brenda, there's no one here," Cale said, peering into the kitchen, and it looked like no one had been here for a while. "Mom," cried Brenda, climbing the stairs to the second floor. "Mom, are you home?" Her mother's bedroom was empty. The bed was made, the closet was open, and only a few old dresses were hanging on the hangers. All the personal items were gone: makeup from the dressing table, photos from the dresser, favorite books from the bedside table. "Cale, get up here," Brenda called out in a trembling voice. "Something's wrong." Cale quickly went upstairs and looked around. His face became serious. "It looks like your mother's gone somewhere," he said, "and she took her things with her." "But why didn't she say anything?" Brenda clutched the envelope in her hands. "I saw her on Monday, and she didn't say anything about traveling." "Open the letter," Cale suggested. "It probably explains everything." They returned to the living room, and Brenda opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were several documents and a folded piece of paper with her mother's handwriting on it. She unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "Dear Brenda and Cale, by the time you read this letter, I will be far away from Mount Rainier. I want to explain my decision so that you will have no doubts about its deliberateness. Cale visited me last week and made it clear that I must disappear from your family after your wedding. Those words made me realize that my presence in the house was indeed unwelcome, so I made the decision to make room for your family life." Brenda's voice shook. She struggled to get the words out. Cale stood nearby, his face gradually turning pale. "However, since the house belonged to me and not you, I decided to dispose of it as I saw fit. On Tuesday, I sold the house to an investment company for $470,000. The transaction is official, and the new owners have taken title. In the envelope, you'll find a certificate of sale and the new owner's contact information. It also contains the keys to the downtown apartment I rented for you for a year. The rent is paid in full. Into your joint account, I transferred $50,000 as a wedding gift." Brenda stopped reading, staring at the piece of paper with unseeing eyes. Cale snatched the letter from her hands and continued reading. "That's impossible," he muttered. "She couldn't sell the house in a week. It's a bureaucratic procedure that takes months." But the envelope did contain the sale documents, stamped and signed. A wire transfer from the bank. A lease for an apartment on Main Street. The keys to the apartment on a keychain with a number on it. "Mom sold our house," Brenda whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She sold our house to strangers." "Wait." Cale grabbed the phone and dialed Sandra's number. Long beeps, then the answering machine. "Leave a message after the beep." "Sandra, it's Cale," he shouted into the receiver. "What the hell is this? Call me back right now. We need to talk." He hung up and immediately dialed again. Same result. "The phone is unavailable," Brenda said bluntly. She disconnected the phone. "This is crazy." Cale paced around the living room, waving his arms. "You can't do this to your own family. Where is she even now?" Brenda picked up the letter again and read it to the end. "I've gone to Aunt Linda's in Oregon. where I'll be staying until I decide what to do next. You won't have my coordinates? I don't want to be accused of being dishonest. Cale wanted me out of your family. He got his wish. Now you can build a life together without interference from the older generation. The apartment I rented for you is in a nice neighborhood near your work. The money in the account will help you start a family life. I wish you happiness in your marriage. I hope you will build a relationship based on mutual respect, a quality that was sadly absent from your plans for me. Sandra. She's lost her mind, Cale said as Brenda fell silent. Completely out of her mind. Who sells a house over a family disagreement? Mom's not crazy, Brenda objected through her tears. She's always been the most rational person I've ever known. Then explain to me the logic behind what she did. Cale tossed the apartment keys on the couch. We wanted a house for the family, and she sold it. What's the point of that? Brenda wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to collect her thoughts. She wrote that you came to her and told her I should disappear from your family, she said slowly. Was that true? Cale froze, realizing he was in an awkward position. I was just explaining to her the reality of the situation, he answered carefully. A young family needs independence. Did you tell her to disappear from our family? Brenda, I was talking about the need for independence. Cale tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. You shouldn't take every word so literally. Then it's true. Brenda got up from the couch and walked to the window. You really did say that. What's wrong with that? Cale stood up too, his voice becoming defensive. I said what we both think, that we need our own space without parental control. But this is her house? Brenda exclaimed. She bought it when I was 2 years old. She's lived in it for almost 30 years. So what? Cale snapped at her. She wasn't going to live in it forever. Sooner or later it was going to pass to the next generation. After she died, not while she was alive. What difference did it make? Cale waved his hand irritably. The main thing was that the house should stay in the family. But it's not in the family now, Brenda shouted. It belongs to some investors now. They stood facing each other in the empty living room, and tension was building between them. It was the first time Cale had seen Brenda so worked up, and the first time Brenda had seen traits in her fiancé that frightened her. Look, Cale said, trying to change to a more peaceful tone. We can fix this. Find your mother, talk to her, explain that there's been a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? Brenda asked coldly. You told her to disappear from our family. She disappeared. It all makes sense. Brenda, don't be so dramatic, Cale asked. We're adults. We can solve any problem. Solve it? Brenda turned to face him. How exactly do you plan to solve the fact that the house has been sold to strangers? Cale opened his mouth to answer, but he couldn't find the words. Indeed, selling real estate is an irreversible transaction. The new owners are unlikely to agree to sell the house back, especially for the same price. We'll find another house, he finally said. 50,000 could put a down payment on a nice place. Another house, Brenda repeated lifelessly. One with no memories, no history. We'll make new memories, Cale suggested. Wouldn't it be better to start married life in a house of our own choosing? But Brenda wasn't listening anymore. She stared at the sale papers on the coffee table and realized that the life she'd planned had fallen apart overnight. Her childhood home, her family traditions, her routines, all gone at the whim of a mother she had thought predictable and malleable. We have to go, she said quietly. This house is no longer ours. Aunt Linda's house stood on a picturesque hill 15 minutes from the ocean shore. It was one story, built of light-colored brick, with a spacious porch and a garden where roses, lavender, and old apple trees grew. When the train arrived in Portland, Linda was waiting for me on the platform with a bouquet of flowers and a concerned look on her face. "Sandra, darling," she hugged me tightly. "You look tired. What's going on? Why did you decide to come all of a sudden?" "I'll tell you at home," I replied, not wanting to discuss family matters in public. I wanted to get some sleep first. Linda didn't insist, though curiosity burned in her eyes. We loaded my suitcases into her old sedan and drove to the house through the nighttime city, where sparse streetlights illuminated the empty streets. "I got you a room upstairs," Linda said as we pulled up to the house. "It's quiet and it overlooks the garden. I think you'll like it." The room was indeed cozy. A big bed with a patchwork quilt Linda had made herself, a desk by the window, bookshelves along the wall. Everything breathed peace and care. "Make yourself at home," Linda said as she helped me carry my suitcases in. "We'll talk in the morning." I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully, without anxious thoughts about the future. The decision had been made, the plan had been fulfilled, and now all I had to do was to get on with my life. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sounds coming from the kitchen. Linda, like me, was a lark and got up early. The sun was shining outside the window, and the garden looked peaceful in the morning light. "Did you sleep well?" Linda asked when I came down to the kitchen. "The coffee is fresh, and I baked your favorite cinnamon rolls." We sat at the table on the veranda, which overlooked the garden and the hills in the distance. Linda poured coffee into the china cups she had inherited from our grandmother and waited patiently until I was ready to speak. "I sold the house and left Brenda," I said without preamble. Linda almost choked on her coffee. "What?" she asked. "You sold the house in Mount Rainier." "I did, and moved in with you, if you don't mind." "Of course I don't mind, but—" "Sandra, what's wrong? You and Brenda always got along so well." I told her everything, from the young one's first plans to remodel the house to my frank conversation with Cale. Linda listened silently, occasionally shaking her head or clucking her tongue in indignation. "You bastard," she said when I finished my story. "How dare he say those things to you?" "He was just being honest about what he both thought," I replied. "Brenda was more diplomatic, but the point didn't change." "And you really sold the house in a week?" "In 5 days, to be exact. Connections from the school system helped expedite all the procedures." Linda sipped her coffee, thinking about what she'd heard. "No regrets?" she asked cautiously. "No," I answered honestly. "The house was mine, and I had the right to use it as I saw fit." "What will you do now?" "I don't know," I shrugged. "I have money, a roof over my head. The rest will come." On Wednesday, my phone rang. Brenda's number. I looked at the screen and hung up without answering. A minute later, the call came again, then another. By evening, 12 missed calls had accumulated. "Maybe we should talk to her," Linda suggested over dinner. "She's your daughter." "She's my daughter who was planning to evict me from my own home," I reminded her. She wasn't calling now because she missed me, but because she'd discovered the consequences of her plans. On Thursday, the calls continued. Now they were joined by messenger messages and emails. I didn't read them, just deleted them, seeing the sender's name. "Mom, please respond," Brenda wrote. "We need to talk. I don't understand why you did what you did. She doesn't. I wonder what she doesn't understand. That I didn't want to be homeless voluntarily, or that I exercised my right to own." On Friday, Cale arrived. Linda saw an unfamiliar car through the window and called me over. "A young man drove up to the house," she said. Tall, in a dark suit. I looked out the window. Cale was standing at the gate, holding a bouquet of flowers and a look of determination on his face. He was clearly expecting to have a serious conversation. "Don't open the door for him," I asked Linda. "What if he doesn't leave?" He would. He has to get back before tonight. Cale stood at the gate for half an hour, going to the door several times, ringing the bell. Linda and I sat in the living room pretending no one was home. Finally, he put the flowers on the doorstep, got in his car, and drove away. Persistent, Linda said. He's used to getting his way, I agreed. But not with me. Saturday morning, the calls stopped, but I got a long email from Brenda. I decided to read it after all. Mom, I don't understand what happened. Cale and I only wanted what was best for everyone. Yes, we planned to live in the house after we got married, but is that a bad thing? Is it wrong for a young family to want to create a cozy home for their children in the place where their mother grew up? You always said that family is the most important thing in life. Where is our family now? You went off to some unknown place, sold the house to strangers, left us to deal with the consequences. Is that fair? I know Cale may have made some unfortunate comments when he talked to you. Men can be too direct sometimes, but he didn't mean to hurt you. We both wanted you to be happy at Aunt Linda's. Please, let's meet and talk it over. Maybe it's not too late to make a change. We can buy the house back from the investors if you help us with the money. I miss you, Mom, and I don't understand why you chose revenge over family happiness. Revenge. So in her mind, self-interest is equal to revenge, and marital happiness is only possible with my voluntary self-sacrifice. I wrote a short reply. Brenda, I wasn't taking revenge. I was protecting my rights. The house was mine, and I used it as I saw fit. You shouldn't ask me for money to buy it back. I'm not going to fund your plans for my property. Live in the apartment I rented for you. Use the money I transferred to your account. That's enough to start a family life. Sandra. Sent the letter and blocked Brendan's address. Enough explanations and excuses. By the end of the week, I had fully settled into Linda's house. We cooked together, tended the garden, went shopping in town. In the evenings, we read books or watched old movies. A quiet, measured life without stress or conflict. You know, Linda said one evening while we were having tea on the veranda, I like having you here. The house has become more alive. I like the peace here, I replied. For the first time in years, I don't have to worry about anything. Do you plan to stay long? I don't know. Maybe I'll find a little house nearby, or buy an apartment in the city. Why don't you stay here? Linda suggested it. It's a big house, plenty of room for two. I looked at the garden where autumn leaves glowed in the setting sun, at the hills in the distance, at the peaceful sky without a single cloud. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Maybe, I agreed. It's nice here. The next morning, the mail arrived. Among the letters was a large envelope with the return address of a law firm in Mount Rainier. I opened it and found inside was a legal notice that Brenda Clark and Cale Anderson were suing to invalidate the sale on the grounds that the seller was mentally disturbed. Mental disorder. So now I'm a crazy old lady who doesn't know what she's doing. I laughed out loud. Years as a school principal had taught me not to be afraid of legal wrangling. I had all the documents proving legal capacity at the time of the transaction, witnesses, doctor's certificates. Trying to challenge the sale was doomed to failure, but it showed how far young people were willing to go to fight for someone else's property. What is it? Linda asked, seeing the envelope in my hands. My daughter is trying to have me declared insane by the court, I answered calmly, to cancel the sale of the house. What are you going to do? Hire a good lawyer and win the case, I said. I have money and time, and most importantly, I have the truth on my side. I put the documents back in the envelope and put it aside. Tomorrow I'll look for a lawyer, but today I just wanted to enjoy the peace and the realization that I'd made the right decision. The house was sold, Brenda and Cale had learned a lesson about ownership, and I was free to live my life the way I wanted, without having to conform to someone else's plans and ambitions.